And we're kicking off this list with Yuga's Naval Laser. Yeah, it's lower on the list because it's not completely useless. I mean, it's a freaking laser after all, and lasers are just cool. Plus, Yuga's can cut through concrete, which is certainly nothing to scoff at. The problem with this particular quirk though is that it's not very easy to control, and he can't use it for, very long periods of time. He has trained to offset the negative effects of his quirk though, and that's why this one isn't higher up on the list. Throughout most of the series, Yuga just didn't really have a whole lot to do with this one though, and seeing as he loses control of his bowels if he overuses it, yeah, that's a pretty big drawback in a fight. Next on the list is a quirk that's such a throwaway, it's actually shared by two different characters. Iron Claws, used by both a UA faculty member and pro hero Power Loader, and a villain named Sickle Claw. The way they use the quirk is different, but both quirks are referred to as Iron Claw, and they both have metal claws on their fingertips. Power Loader uses his metal claws to dig himself underground, and he's created some pretty cool underground labyrinths using his ability. It's certainly useful for like maneuvering underground like a mole to either surprise an enemy or infiltrate an enemy in theory, but in terms of physical combat, it's not super effective compared to the more impressive powers we see in the series anyway, especially if you're like fighting someone who can fly or something. I don't know, I mean, I guess you can hit people with it. That's what the villain character does, but other than that, it's just kind of underwhelming compared to like the grander quirks. Alright, it's obvious this next quirk had to be somewhere on here. It's Pop Off. Crazy that this one isn't number one, right? Well, it's definitely the most famous of the not so fantastic quirks in the series, but it's actually by no means the least useful. Mineta, on the other hand, would probably be at the number one spot if this were a list of the worst characters. But yeah, we all know what this quirk does. Mineta grows sticky purple balls from his head, which is generally used simply as an accessory to help the other heroes out in, larger maneuvers to take down an enemy. On its own though, this quirk doesn't really do much. Maybe if Mineta wasn't so distracted by all the stuff he's distracted by, if you know the show, you know what I mean, then maybe he could actually focus his energy into becoming a more capable hero, but as it stands, that just isn't really the case. Next on the list is Bubble Girl's Bubble Quirk. Now look, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of bubbles, whether it's bubbles from Trailer Park Boys or the round floaty things we typically think of when we hear the word bubbles. They're fun, but in battle, they're probably useless, unless they're, giant bubbles you can trap someone inside of or something like that. Bubble Girl's bubbles are not that kind. Bubble Girl can imbue her bubbles with a variety of odors that she has to have smelt before. Yeah, good smells, bad smells, as long as she's smelt it, she can use it. This could definitely be a somewhat useful distraction, like if she was going up against a character who used smell to track its target, she could imbue a bubble with a specific smell to throw, her opponent off or something in that kind of vein, but in terms of battle, this one really just isn't gonna do much. Second place goes to Kenji's Dog Head quirk. This quirk is so pointless that it doesn't even have like an official name. I'm calling it Dog Head, but you can really call it whatever you want. Now Kenji himself isn't useless as he is the chief of police, so he obviously rose through the ranks and is an accomplished policeman, but I highly doubt that has anything to do with him being a dog man. He had some enhanced capabilities due to him having the head of a dog. He'd probably be a superhero rather than a policeman, but that's sadly not the case for him. I mean, he most likely has, better hearing and smell than most humans do, and he's probably got a pretty solid bite as well, but seeing as he's bipedal, it's doubtful he has the increased speed of a canine. He's just a guy with a dog's head. Not the most impressive quirk, but not the absolute worst either. That's of course going to our number one spot. And coming in at the top list is Daikaku's Big Horn quirk. Yeah, the news anchor guy. His quirk is really more of a hindrance than a power. It's like a really noticeable skin condition or something. Unless you like the idea of having big horns growing out from your head. I mean, you'd never have to buy plastic horns from Spirit Halloween for your demon costume party ever again, but who doesn't like going to Spirit of Halloween? Other than ramming into an enemy with your head, I don't see how these horns would be of any help to you, especially in a world filled with people who can shoot fire from their hands or lift cars over their heads. Now, to be fair, we don't really know much about this quirk other than what it looks like, but seeing as this guy turned out to be a news anchor rather than a superhero, I think it's pretty safe to say his horns don't really offer much, other than making him a pretty recognizable news anchor. Who knows though, maybe he's just the strongest character in the whole series, but being on the news was always his dream.